What's up, hobby friends? My name is Casey and welcome back to another miniature rescue. Today we're going to get right into it with a classic Space Marine. So I'm taking on a really cool older Space Marine this time, and it's got some paint on it. It's not the worst paint I've seen. It's actually pretty cool. It's got a cool design to it, but it definitely needs some help. The backpack that he has is mismatched and doesn't technically fit and isn't for this model, but it's the one that came with this model. This was a donation from a subscriber, so thanks Mike for sending this in, and I want to give it some new life. At the same time, I want to try and make it look pretty close to the way that this is. It's got a cool camo pattern on it, and I want to try and replicate that, maybe in a little bit of a different way, but I think it's going to be fun, so let's see what we can do. So the first thing we need to do with this guy is get him into a small jar of acetone. The model itself is all metal, but the backpack is in fact plastic, so we can't exactly put the whole thing in. Now, they're in two pieces already, so it's going to be a little bit easier. I'm going to get out a jar of isopropyl alcohol for the backpack specifically. Then I'm going to take both of those jars after letting it sit for a little bit and kind of soften the paint up and get those into a water bath in my sonic cleaner. Being in the sonic cleaner is going to allow that paint to just get ripped right off of that model, and hopefully if the paint isn't really adhered to the metal, it's just going to come right off. So let's let that sit for a little bit and then we'll start to scrub it off and clean it up. So I've run the models a couple of times in the sonic cleaner, probably 30 minutes or so, and especially the Space Marine he's clean. He's real clean. The acetone does a ton of work on this and really just cuts through the paint and makes it come right off. Same story for the backpack too. I think almost all of this paint, it's actually possible that these models maybe didn't have primer on them because paint doesn't usually come off this easily. In fact, on the backpack, I don't even know if there's any paint left. Overall though, there's not that much on here that's really going to start to interfere with our new paint job. There's a few little tiny bits here and there that we can get with a soft wire brush that'll probably clean that up a little bit better. But overall, this should paint up really nicely. So you can see what I mean on the backpack. There just isn't any paint left. This is exactly how it came out of the sonic cleaner, which is pretty great. That just means we really don't have to do a ton of work. Like I also mentioned, this isn't actually the backpack that goes with this model. You can see that it doesn't exactly line up with the tab on the back. It's a little bit too small, but it's at least in the same era of backpacks. This backpack, I'm pretty sure belongs to a different Space Marine sergeant or something. This is a Space Marine captain, but this backpack is from a different model altogether, which is fine. For this, I think it makes perfect sense to have the captain with a sweet banner. Maybe we can put something on there if we feel like it. I don't know if I'm going to get there, but we could do something fun if we wanted to. From here, it's going to be about cleaning up the mold lines, getting this guy onto a proper base, and getting him prepped for paint. Just a little bit of work with an X-Acto, and I can kind of get this hole just that much bigger, and we're going to be able to fit this onto the little nub on the back of the Space Marine. It's almost the exact right size, so it didn't take a lot, and this is going to sit nice and flush, and it's going to look how it's supposed to look. The last thing I want to do is use a Dremel with a soft wire brush attachment and just clean up all the metal and try and get any of the extra paint off of here so that we can prime this model. At this point, he's looking pretty shiny. You can read the tab on the bottom, GW 1990. This is it's an old model, but I really enjoy this model in particular. I like his pose. It's a good monopose model, but it's got some dynamic movement. He's throwing the grenade. He's got the sweet metal leg going on here. It's a good model. Something else we need to do is get a base for this model. Now, since we're going for that camo look that the original paint job had, I'm not actually sure what to pair this with. Like, it probably should be some kind of a jungle theme. I'm gonna see what I've got. I might have something already done that'll work just fine for this, which would be kind of convenient. If not, I'll find something cool and we'll put it together. Okay, so I looked through a bunch of bases. I've got some nice pre-painted ones, but they just don't feel right for this. So I'm gonna take a look on my mini factory, see if there's any base toppers that I like that are more jungly themed maybe. And if not, I think I might have some aquarium plants that might work, but we'll see. Okay, so I'm on my mini factory and I'm gonna look for some jungle base toppers. So right out of the gate, there's some pretty cool stuff from Goonmaster here. Some nice jungle ruin bases, but I think I want something with a little more structure on it. That way I can jam some plants in there and they can kind of be overgrown. And I don't want to spend too much money, so some of these are a little bit bigger in terms of the packs that you get. Even though there's some cool stuff in here, they might have some individual ones for sale, but this is a $12 set. This is a little bit much for just some base topper for one model. Let's go a little faster. Sewers, Roads, Graveyards, Lava, Steampunk, Blighttown. That could be fun. No. We can do better. I kind of like these dune base toppers. These look pretty cool. It has a little bit of structure. It'll probably fit our monopose model just fine. We can put a little bit of dirt and some stuff in here that might be cool. And we can put some plants growing out of these rocks to make it look a little more jungly. So a little bit less sand and more jungle. All right, so I'll save that one for now. It's $2.50. Of course, it's Zabavka Workshop. I should have known. Okay, here's some jungle bases, a set of 7 of them. I don't know what size they are in particular. These are from PS Miniatures, but these look pretty cool. I like this rock with the stump behind it. Both of these would work really well. We could definitely get some wet mud going and make it pretty neat. This might be the one. So yeah, I found the smaller set and there are some nice 32mm bases, including the one that I was kind of thinking about. So I think this is probably gonna do. $5. Okay, so I got 3 different base toppers printed out, and one of them in particular is definitely going to work. There's a little bit of brick that our guy can get punched into. We'll put a little pin in there, and there's some room in front for some dirt and moss and whatever, and then there's some rocks and bricks and stuff that are broken up that we can kind of make into kind of a jungly looking scene. The other ones, there's just not enough flat space for him to stand on. This model is not that dynamic. So I'll just put him in the drawer for later. Now what I'm gonna wanna do is pin this guy to a handle, and that way we can put this onto another handle with some putty and paint them separately and then get this guy glued down. The other thing I wanna work on, and I'm not sure how I'm gonna do it yet, is after we paint the backpack and we put everything on, I wanna put a flag on this guy. And there's a couple ways we can do that, but I wanna make it pretty permanent. So I think the route I'm gonna go is using a soda can and actually making a flag out of that. We'll see how it goes. For now, let's get this pinned, let's get these put onto handles, and then we'll go from there. After priming, it was time to get out some paint. I'm going for a similar color scheme to the original, so I tried to match the paint with what I had on hand. I'm using a kind of jungle green that has a bit of white in it to do a majority of the base coating. and I'll come back in with a more saturated yellow-green to basically give it some midtones. The idea being that with the camo, we can put in some slightly darker green as little chunks and pieces of that camo to finish it off. I'm using the same colors for the base, and while I'm here, I might as well just go ahead and finish it since the model and backpack are pinned to wooden handles anyway. After getting the green on the base, I dry brushed with some gray to get that stone step looking pretty good. And then I came back in with some watered down green and orange and started bringing back the color for the ground. For the jungly plants, I went with some fish tank leaves. These are really cheap and easy to trim for basing. The only problem with them is the extremely plastic look that they have. So they need to be painted to really look more realistic. I used the same greens as before, that way the camouflage makes a bit more sense with the armor color. And they ended up actually looking pretty good. I finished off the base with a variety of static grass, grass tufts, and some little leaves, all in similar colors to what we've got going on with the paint. The last thing to do before painting anything else is to take care of the base rim with a bit of black. Now that we got the base coats taken care of, the base is pretty much done. What we need to do is start doing all of the camouflage work. Now, what I usually like to do is use silly putty, and we're going to use 3 different colors. So a dark green, kind of a dark reddish brown, and then like a bluish black. Not super black, so it doesn't stand out too much. We want it to still blend in nicely. So we're gonna wrap the model in the backpack with silly putty in different patterns, and then try and lay each color around or on top and get those little blobs. Obviously you could just do this with a brush, but I really want to make it clean, I want it crisp, and I want this to be pretty unique. And the camo that I've done in the past on a Space Wolf Terminator that I did up like last year, it turned out really good, really nice. So I want to do that again with these different colors on this green Space Marine, and I think it's going to give a pretty good result, but let's find out. I continue to lay down silly putty layers, and the goal here is just to slightly overlap each color. That way we have blocks of broken up color and green armor that blend into the background as much as possible. Honestly, this process is pretty straightforward. Wrap the putty around, put little clumps here and there, and paint another layer. I don't think there's really a wrong way to go about this, and what you end up with is a nice random assortment of color. And especially when they're overlapping each other, they kind of give it that camouflaged look. If I were to do this again though, and I'm sure I will at some point, I think I would commit harder to each color. Since you end up covering a little bit of each color the more you put on, you end up with those first layers not really showing up as much as maybe you would want to, or I would want to. For example, that dark green. I think I should have gone for a more 50-50 split with that color and the base coat. And instead what we have here are strips of color on maybe 25% of the model instead of half, so it could be better. After getting all the color on though, I really like how it turned out. It's kind of hard to tell what it's actually going to look like, but now we can start filling in details and really see how it actually looks. I used a dark metallic as a base coat for the trim, gun parts, and the leg. The dark metal helps to outline everything. I won't need to come back and wash these pieces since we can put a bright metallic over the top of it to highlight it, and the darker metal on the sides is going to stand out nicely against the rest of the armor. The head is going to be a good amount of work. He's pretty bald, and that's fine, but I really want to bring in a lot more to make the head more interesting. For now, I'll start with a nice pink flesh tone. This needs a few coats so we don't lose any detail, so I'll periodically come back to it in order to put more paint on. The leather pouches get dark reddish brown that's similar to the color on the armor. This helps it blend in a little better and works well as a base coat for leather. Back to the head, I'm using watered down reddish purple to glaze in some shadows. This always does a ton of work for me on faces. Getting that shadow color brings in some life to the face, a little bit of blood under the skin kind of thing, and starts to separate the pieces on the model, so I know where to begin highlighting the skin. I also add a bit of gray into that mix and begin glazing that on the top of the head, and trying to make him a stubbly beard. This does take time, a lot of thin layers to start to darken it down, trying to keep the consistency pretty thin and trying not to leave splotches all over the head. It looks pretty bad for a while, but a ton of back and forth between the gray mix, the reddish purple glaze, and a lighter flesh tone that I use for the highlights on the cheeks, ears, nose, brow, and it finally ends up in a pretty good place. The thing with using really thin layers of paint is that you have a ton of control over the way that it looks. You can build up layers of color with a lot of passes, and you don't clog any of the details, so you can keep working it until you're happy. It's an exercise in patience, but you really do get out of it what you put into it. If this is something that you struggle with, just keep in mind that since it's so thin, you can always paint over it and try something else. But it is one of those things that if you stick with it, you're more likely to be much happier with the outcome of the process, rather than something like picking a single color to paint his hair, which is non-existent on this particular model. Completely alternatively, I could have just kept him bald and called it a day, but I didn't want to do that. I matched the Aquila and rope on the chest to the original, laying down some gold and washing it down with some red wash, and the rope got a coat of that reddish brown, highlighted with some slightly brighter red to just pick out the strands a bit better. Finally, I came back in with that bright metallic that I had mentioned earlier and highlighted all of the silver. A little bit of kind of overbrushing and dry brushing on the leg, and you can see that it just takes everything and really brightens it up while keeping those recesses still pretty dark, so no wash necessary. Okay, now for some extra details. I really want this guy to have some sweet shoulder pads, and for this I'm going to use some Goblin Hobbies stamps. Full disclosure, I do own half of Goblin Hobbies along with my friend Brent from Goobertown Hobbies, and we do indeed make the Goblin Hobbies Stampin Kits. Now, I love these things, and I use them on just about every project that I possibly can. It's been really awesome for me to not have to spend all the time in the world doing decals or, freehand or whatever it is, and get some awesome designs on my models. Now, I may be a little biased, but stamping is just too much fun and does so much for minis that it's something I just can't pass up when going to do a project like this. So here we go. I lay down some Stampin' color onto the icon that I want, scrape away the excess with my scraper card, quickly and gently roll over the top of the design with my stamper, check the head to see if I need to prune away any excess from the stamper head, sight down the clear end of the stamper, and press the image onto my model. In just about 10 seconds, this guy has an absolutely awesome shoulder pad. Now I repeat that process for the other side, and he's basically ready to go. I think it's also worth mentioning that I'm using our bright gray here and not white. And the reason for that is that I want this to blend in a little bit better with the model. It's not going to be pure white. Just like when we paint models, we're not using pure white, we're using really bright grays in order to basically pretend that it's white. But it leaves you room to go up even higher in value, so we don't want to just put stark white icons on his shoulders. After doing a little bit of cleanup, I can glue the backpack onto the model and get him put onto the base. I use the pin in his foot, find a good spot for him on the base, drill a new hole through the topper and plastic base, and I just glue him down. Now I could stop here, he's looking pretty sweet, but... Okay, so I've painted the model, and I've been going back and forth on whether or not I actually want to put a flag on the flagpole. It just seems a little bit, counterintuitive to have a flag on a camouflage Space Marine, but it's there. The backpack has the flagpole. So I feel like something has to be done. Maybe we can make it a stealthy flag, but I think a flag is just gonna not be stealthy. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this can of perfume water and cut it up, and we're gonna try and make something that at least makes some amount of sense for the flagpole that we have on the backpack. These two cut pretty easily with an X-Acto. Obviously still have to be careful, and the edges are going to be pretty sharp. We're going to have to do something to make it look more flag-like, but we'll start with cutting it out. Alright, so I've got a couple pieces here. They're pretty sharp right now. The bigger one's starting to look a little bit more like a flag. It's got some wrinkles in here. I need to bend and roll this, you can hear that, to kind of get those waves in the flag. So I'm going to take my model that I have finished here, and I'm going to do a quick size comparison, see what kind of size I actually want on this. And actually this piece is looking pretty good right now. Get it so that I can wrap it around those top poles. I don't know. I'm going to get it sized out, cut down properly, get a nice flaggy shape, and then paint it up so that it doesn't look like metal. Because I don't want to handle the model a ton right now, it's already done, it's already put on space, I have this extra backpack with the flagpole. It's the exact same backpack from the same era. This is 1994, Games Workshop on the side, so I can at least get the sizing right. Doing this with metal makes a lot of sense. This is pretty thin, and you can get some nice waves in the actual material, and that's pretty much going to hold its shape no matter what you're going to do after it's on to the model. Really what I want to do is just get a bunch of wrinkles in here just to make it look a little more tattered. It doesn't have to be perfect, especially when paint goes down on this. It's going to look a lot better. The one thing is I want to make sure that there aren't any like super little tiny bits of edge hanging off. I want it to at least try and look like cloth the best I can. Alright, so I've got the hooks, got the flag looking pretty good here. Technically hanging on this side. This is going to be right down to the neck on our model, and I'm hoping that that's going to fit. So that'll just fit on the back of our model. We're barely touching the back of the armor, and this is going to give us plenty of space to work with. Now that I've got my shape and I'm pretty happy with the way that it looks, I'm going to get it glued down to the back, and then we can start to get some primer on this thing and get some other designs on here to, I guess, match the Marine as best we can. The metal has a plastic coating on the inside, so it's a little bit hydrophobic, which means that I just need to take it a little bit slow, or I probably could have just sanded this down beforehand. But a few thin coats should do just fine. Alright, so I put a couple stamps on here, and now I'm going to color them up a little bit. Still trying to figure out a good way to do camouflage flag, but I don't know, make it a little bit dirty, get some grime on there, and then hang it on our guy and see how he looks. A little bit of brown ink to darken down the edges, really blending that yellow and black together. I think this is starting to look pretty cool. Still not what I would call stealthy, but still looks cool. So we're just gonna run with it. All right, so I've got the flag. Now I'm just gonna put it onto the model, and then we're gonna call it a day. I really like old models like this. There's just something about the way that they used to sculpt things, the kind of aesthetic that they had, these smaller details that had to be a little bit extra large so that they could actually, hand sculpt them, and that way we could paint them. There was different thought behind these models than there are today. Sometimes you run into things like tiny details that don't really make that much sense, and there's just so many of them that it's really hard to know what you're supposed to be painting. And on old models like this, it doesn't feel that way. It feels very deliberate, and I really like that about them. I'm definitely going to say that this flag does not add to the stealthiness of this model, but it also looks really good, so I don't care. This was a really fun project though, and I'm really glad that Mike sent this model in. I've been blasting my way through the models that he sent, and I'm really enjoying it so far. There are a ton more too, so I don't even know what's going to be next. I mean, I do, but we'll get there. Until then, Thank you again for joining me on another miniature rescue. If you like something about this video, consider hitting that like button, sharing this video with your hobby friends, and subscribing for more miniature rescues. Once again, I'm Casey, and I will see you in the next video. And here is the completed Space Marine Sergeant? Captain? I think it's a Captain. Space Marine Captain. Thanks again for watching.